Oh, we're live. I see it.
All right, so our prompt was I'm going to read it for the video, um, was to think about behavioral consultants in corporations and the employees that work there and kind of outline the policies about that BCBAs have versus what employees have and talk about some problems that could occur and how to solve them. So one of the problems that we had kind of discussed
Well, we
was,
kind of shared this.
go ahead. Okay, one of the problems that we kind of discussed was signing paperwork, which was an example in the book, but the employer wanted the BCBA to sign paperwork that saying that um, she had done something that she hadn't actually done and what she should have done or what she should say to the back to the employer.
Well, I definitely think that there's at least a problem in just backtracking data, period, because you don't really know if it's going to be 100% reliable and if it's, the time it happened or how long it happened for and all those things all the reasons you take all the data for.
I would agree. I think that it would be really inaccurate data if it were backdated and say it were 3 o'clock and you had a behavior at 11 o'clock, you wouldn't remember all of the topographies that occurred within that behavior, and it would be really difficult to have that accurate data if you weren't taking it in the moment.
At the same time, though, I feel like sometimes it's really difficult to take data on the moment. Something might happen and you don't have a clipboard with you. So maybe how long is too long before your memory becomes a little fuzzy?
That's a good question. Where did Catherine go?
Oh, oops. Um, I mean, I've definitely taken a good amount of data myself, and sometimes it's tallies like, oh, this happened 7 times. Maybe it happened six. Maybe it was eight. Um, I guess I wasn't really sure. And I feel like it might happen a lot more than people would think.
I think it would happen a lot more than people would actually let on to. I don't necessarily think that people would tell others that they kind of missed the ball or like that they didn't know exactly how many times because wouldn't want people to think that they weren't good instructors. But I think realistically, it's not going to be every time that you know exactly how many times he a child hit within a session. I mean, or within 5 minutes if he's just like banging on the floor or something like that. You're not going to be able to count all of those in the moment while you're still trying to kind of intervene with this kid.
Um, so I wonder, like, let's say there's a lot of behaviors, maybe 30, 50, 70. Um, I wonder how off you would have to be to really skew that data a lot. Like maybe you missed 5 out of 30 or 5 out of 7. Those would be really different percentages.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say I mean, what's accurate and what's not accurate, I guess. I mean, obviously 5 out of 30 versus 5 out of 7 would be really different, but you wouldn't really be able to tell if you didn't have the accurate data to compare it to.
Right, exactly. But yeah, as far as really backdating a lot of data, I don't think I've ever encountered that. Um, I did like the example in the book. Um, I think the quote was, "Please don't ask me to violate my professional ethics." That was the BCBA's response to the manager.
And
Um,
I think that that's a really good way to address that. And I mean, if I was in that person's shoes, I don't know what I would say or what I would do if my supervisor still wanted me to um, like kind of sign off on that data that was falsified, basically.
and you know what? I don't know if I would actually have the guts to really say that to somebody. I feel like
That's true.
it's a lot easier to say that you would do something than actually follow through and do it. Um, and I might not be the most um, forward person.
Yeah, I'm
So,
super non-confrontational, so stuff like that makes me really like anxious, and so it would be really hard for me to suck it up and be like, no, I really don't feel comfortable doing that. But so not about me at that point. It would be about the client that I was falsifying data for and saying that it's really not best for either of us. Also,
do we have Catherine back?
she's in and out.
Okay. We can move on, do you think, to a next question?
Yeah.
Um, do you have a good one?
Along the kind of same lines as the taking data and then backdating it was the making up of data. So if you were in the situation where someone said that you were at said that you were doing something, said that you were doing these, what are they called? That maybe you had done a workshop, but you actually hadn't done the workshop. Saying that you had done some of those would be really unethical to sign off on.
I don't know if you guys are still in the same scenario. This Google Hangout really loves me. I'm getting very frustrated. But anyway, if you're still in the same scenario, I was just going to say one of the problems was too is that the person wanted the VCBA to sign off on something they had never done. And that right there is a huge ethical problem because if you didn't do it, you should never sign off on it. But you may have already said that, so if you did, I'm sorry.
No, that's what we were just getting into, so you're fine.
Okay. Sorry.
Google
One of
Hangouts
those
is
days.
a mess.
It is. But yeah, like I think there's just a lot of little issues with that, and that's definitely something as a BCBA that I don't think we should ever do. Like, but anyway,
I
we
mean,
can
I don't think
continue.
that's really an ethical thing to do as a person ever, to say that you did something even though you didn't.
Right, right.
So,
And to put
Um,
a signature on it is even worse. So,
and I think we had lost you when I was talking about the scenario from the book when the girl said, "Please don't ask me to violate my professional ethics." So I think that's like a really good thing to just say, up front and just say it, don't make me do it, and hopefully that would be the end of it. It sounds like a really professional thing to say, and it's straightforward.
that's actually like a good thing I think for all of us to kind of have in our back pocket because unfortunately those things probably are going to come up. And it is kind of nice to just be able to say, like, our ethical guidelines don't allow us to do that. And it can kind of, not that we don't mind saying it ourselves, but it can be hard if it's like a friend or somebody that you consider that, like someone you work with or someone you've worked with a long time and you maybe would want to help someone out. I think it's good that we can just kind of be like, it's not in our ethical guidelines and that's not something we're going to do.
Actually, I feel like
Kind
the
of
more
puts the pressure on.
I hear you say it, like the more serious it sounds, opposed to, oh, I really shouldn't talk about that. I feel like just the words ethical guidelines are really a slap in the face.
Mm-hmm.
They're fighting words.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, and how would your supervisor react to that? I mean, I'm sure that they wouldn't be happy saying that they were, seeing as they were trying to get you to do something that was technically unethical. I don't know. I don't think that that would go over very well.
Right.
I think it definitely depends on the relationship you have with that person too. Maybe it would be
Well, it really
harder to
does.
say.
That's when it can get tricky, I think.
Yeah, maybe you've worked with somebody for a very long time and you have a great, professional and friendship relationship, and then if they ask you to violate some guidelines, that would get kind of hairy, I think.
That could definitely disrupt your personal relationship and both your professional relationship too, because I'm sure that they wouldn't want, they would still feel those feelings as just your friend and not just your boss or your coworker as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully people that you work with are ethical.
Well, I'm sure that everyone has that one person that kind of screws up the curve or whatever.
Or even think of going into someplace new where you really don't know people that well. That could even be like thinking of it in the sense of not where we would maybe know people or have, somewhat professional friendships with them and stuff. That could be tricky too. And that's when I think it would be really good to have that saying, like, this just doesn't go with our ethical guidelines for being a BCBA, because that, and especially when you're like meeting new people, does that make sense? Like if you're starting new at a place and you would, that could be tricky too. So I guess I liked your idea, Joanna, of just being able to say like that just doesn't fit into our guidelines and I'm not going to do it.
In that situation, though, maybe you would have to say that regardless, but maybe it wouldn't be such, I don't know. I still don't, I get that it's a good thing to say, but I don't know how well it would go over with anyone really. Because maybe that person would then think, okay, well, now this person I have hired can't do any of the stuff that I want her to do. So now what am I going to do?
Yeah, that would be tough because that might be one of those places that they do that kind of stuff all the time, or I don't know. Then you have like a whole other dilemma. I feel like this stuff is great if you like think about all the scenarios.
Um, I think it would even make it harder if you had maybe a signed contract, um, saying you're going to work there for a certain amount of years, and it turns out to be like a sketchy place where people are kind of just fudging things their own way.
So my boss has always had a mutual contract that she's signed with any kind of school or company that she's gone into to consult with as a BCBA, and she recommended it. I don't know if this is common practice or if this is just something that she did, but she has her own guidelines that she requires basically the person who is working with her to follow too, and if they don't, then they're at breach of contract as well. So I don't know if that's like common or if that's just something she has thought of, but it's worked well for her in the past because she has unfortunately worked with some schools that have wanted her to maybe fudge some different things or make some data to get things rolling along with different IEP goals and stuff. So I don't know. I wonder if we'll get into that a little bit more in class or not, but if that's common practice or if that's just something she does. Because yeah, you could really get stuck if you had your own contract that you had to stay at a place like that and you're constantly having to be like, not my ethical thing. Like that would be difficult.
It's definitely smart to protect yourself. If something...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were...
Oh, it's just smart to protect yourself. If you have to write something out saying, I'm willing to work here, but here's what I need from you as an employer, your A, B, C, D. It's definitely not a bad idea.
And I think that that is something that would happen in the interview process when the company is, deciding if they want a BCBA on board. I think that you both have to put it all out there and say, this is what I need from you, and this is what you need from me, and let's see if we can make this work.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
think
really good
that,
point. Those conversations would be so tricky. Like you were saying, it's tough if you have to always be like, no, that's not within my ethical guidelines. Like it could get tricky.
right. But I'm sure that companies do that a lot. I mean, I'm in the advanced ABA class as well. And so for our FBA project, we had to have our child's parents sign contracts saying that we aren't technically BCBAs yet. We don't have all the qualifications, blah, blah, blah. And my center director actually wrote up a new contract saying that I was under the supervision of BCBA and that, their child was going to get the right services because I'm not just doing it on my own. I have like their help kind of behind me, even though it's all my ideas. So I think that companies do make up contracts for specific things that they need to.
I think that's really smart because then you're just letting it all out up front and you're just really honest. And, yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
All right. Should we go on? Another thing that we were going to talk about was making hypotheses or interventions based off like 5-minute conversations that you had with parents or coworkers.
I think it's unfortunate that behavior function
Can you repeat yourself?
come from those kind of conversations. Oh, what's that?
Do you mind repeating that? You broke out kind of bad.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
So I think that one of the problems can be if you do assume things from these conversations and you want to make these big hypotheses, the student or the client and all those proper steps, or otherwise I think people end up assuming functions of behavior. They end up assuming that students might need things that they might not necessarily need. So I think a point that could come up if you're having this big conversation with somebody at work and you're like, oh, well, that's what it is, or this is what I'll do, or I mean, I think there can be a problem in that, basically.
That can also change the way that you're implementing an intervention. If you have this thought in your head or that they put something in your head like, oh, this is the function, then that can change the way you're thinking, change the way you're doing things, and kind of mess up everything, really, without the proper, data taken to back it up.
I feel like this happens to me all the time. Where I work and the people I work with, nobody really has any experience in ABA. And I feel like people ask me a lot of questions because I feel like I've done it for quite a while. And usually it's literally a 5 to 10 minute conversation of them describing their student or client or child and then asking for advice. And I feel like I can't really give them any advice anyway because, one person's story is probably different than maybe what's happening or would be an opinion, or maybe they're missing something. But I feel like at the same time, if I don't give them an answer, it makes me appear uneducated, which really bugs me too.
Yeah, that's a tricky situation.
There's definitely, all these people looking for some sort of advice, and I can't give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be hard even after you get your BCBA, you're like, and you're certified, you're still not going to be able to give them that information just because you've never seen the child, you don't know exactly what the behavior looks like, you don't, I mean, unless you tell them like, hey, take data on, when it's occurring and whatever, I mean, but you also probably don't have time in your schedule to do that for everyone that comes up to you and asks you a question, It could get hard.
Yeah, it could. Especially if that's maybe a student that you're not working with, or a like therapist or something that you're not overseeing. But it is tricky because I mean, I guess ethically we really shouldn't offer our advice until we like see and evaluate the client,
Right.
right?
If you're signed off on their program or whatever.
Yeah. Or if you can get them to collect the correct data, but then also really you're not supposed to know much about other clients that aren't yours either. So that adds like a whole nother ethical dilemma on the person kind of that's telling you about it. And if you continue to listen and ask more questions, and you are asking about a client that's not the case that's not your case. And that poses another ethical problem.
Right. Well, should you be talking about your client that, to other people, or listening about other people's clients that aren't yours? And how do you politely, redirect that conversation?
That's tough to do.
Right.
Because when you have 3 people,
I
and
think
like our center has, I think, 10 instructors, and so we have multiple people on each child's case. And so when there's 3 instructors that have one child in a room talking about this, I mean, their client, there's no way that you're going to not overhear their conversation. And it's hard to, I mean, you just have to be really aware of where you're talking and who's around and stuff like that to make it okay for those conversations to take place. And especially with HIPAA and all the violations that could go along with that, you just have to be really careful.
I find
what
myself
are
in
those
that
cases
situation.
too?
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I find myself going out with some coworkers for a snack after work sometimes, and I feel like people often talk about clients and use their names out in public, and I'm always really uncomfortable with it. But they're my work friends and coworkers, and it's really hard either reminding them to shush or being direct, because as I was saying, I'm not a very direct person, to say, you really can't do that. I don't know if that's where you were going.
Yeah, no, yeah. And I mean, I've been in that same situation where we, like, all of our coworkers go out to dinner and we're kind of talking about our kids, but we use, like, code names or we use their initials. That way no one else around knows what's going on. And we haven't done that in a really long time because we've been trying to be really careful about that and not talking about it outside of work because, you're not supposed to. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is tricky. And it's when people might ask you about things too. Maybe even in that same kind of situation, you happen to be like grabbing dinner or something, and people might ask you like, "Oh, I saw something happening with you and so. What happened?" And it is hard to kind of shut that down and redirect it. Like I feel like that's just it is. It's like tricky, and it's hard if not a super direct person, and you want to everyone's friend, stuff like that. So you do have to kind of, as probably as BCBAs, we would have to draw more of a line, I guess, when it comes to that stuff, because you are kind of overseeing different people and a little more in charge, so to speak. So yeah, it's always tricky, and you just have to, I don't know, maybe redirect the conversation or to say, let's not talk about it outside of work. But that's so much easier said than done.
Yeah. And I've also been in the situation where I've been talking to another child's parents, and they're like, oh, well, like, what happened or something, or I said one day that my schedule was kind of all up in the air because I had lost a client, but we were getting some new kids into the center, and the parent was like, oh, well, who left? What's going on? And I was like, well, can't really talk about that with you, and it's hard to not give them that information just because they see the other kids around the center so often that it's hard to not say, oh, like, this kid left, but I don't know. It's just difficult to have those kinds of conversations with parents as well.
Yeah, it really is. Or just even, I've had parents ask, right now I am currently in a classroom with a lot of typical students, and there's 2 students who have therapists that work with them throughout the day. And I've had other parents even ask, like, why are you here? And, oh, who do you work with? And, oh, are they in the classroom during the day? And, just those kind of questions. And even in that situation, it is tricky. And it's one of those things you just kind of have to answer. Is awkward.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can't say anything, so just have to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The nice thing about my work is I don't see parents at all. My kids are all bused to and from school, so I feel like I've gotten away with it. But I think a good way to address it is not engage to start with, because I think the more you do, violate rules, the harder it is to get back on track later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're really professional and just, don't give out any information from the get-go, I think parents won't really fish for it as much either.
I totally agree. I think you almost have to keep people at arm's length, so to speak. And that's exactly what I've done in this classroom. I just I don't engage with the parents a lot, and that has definitely helped. But you'll be surprised, there's a few of them that are still quite persistent and still want to know things, even though I haven't answered anything back. So it's tricky, but I definitely recommend that. Yeah, I really do pretty much keep to myself, and I stay focused on the student that I'm working with.
Yeah.
And it helps,
Well,
but yeah.
It's also hard because, those persistent parents, it's, I don't even know how to say this. You're also, if you're sitting in a classroom or something, then you're not only watching the child that you're working with, but you're also watching their child.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in the same classroom, so it's hard to not give them that kind of information.
Right.
Because it's kind of their problem also. So it's like, I don't know, where do you draw
My
that
boss
line?
has always said we can tell them where we work, but that's the only information, and my name, obviously, but that's the only information I can give them.
Okay.
So, even though telling my work does kind of give a little bit of information right there, which is unfortunate, but that's just in the title of where I work. So, if parents are really concerned about me being in the room, I can say that, but then, it's harder with the follow-up questions and stuff, because like you said, they kind of do have a right to know a little bit about me because I am in a room with their kid every single day. So, yeah, it's tricky.
Does the classroom teacher ever say anything or hear these parents asking you questions?
Yeah, she's been really good about it and has redirected them as well. So we really, and it seems like it's kind of stopped, I guess. It was more towards the beginning of the school year, and since I was very vague and kind of kept the discussion around the whole entire classroom and just my place in the classroom, not necessarily with a certain student, it has like gone away. Bringing on some of extinction. So that has helped, and it isn't as common now, but she luckily kept it down as well. Like she didn't really, say a lot about the kiddos or anything either. So that worked out well.
It's a good thing we know how to shape behavior.
I know, right?
I think it definitely makes for an awkward workplace sometimes.
Yeah, it can.
Okay, should we move on to another question?
Sure. Let's see. I'm trying to looking at what we have crossed
I
out.
think like the employees thinking that the BCBA is kind of a know-it-all, and there's that lack of trust because they just kind of waltz right in and kind of take charge. I think that is a challenge that could come up a lot.
Let's just start out by saying that everyone should just listen to us because BCBAs do know everything. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No. I have had that problem, actually. Just kidding, everyone. But anyway, I have had that problem. I worked with a team that had an OT and a speech therapist along with myself and my BCBA. And we had a lot of difficulty with getting them on board and kind of having them follow any kind of behavioral routines or suggestions, or it's definitely really can be tricky because I do think there is a lack of trust, and I think unfortunately sometimes the people that we end up tending to work with, like OTs and speech therapists and there's some people within our own little community that don't necessarily agree with ABA and don't necessarily think that it works. So
I would agree with that.
It can be.
I went to school, I went to my undergraduate degrees in speech pathology, and I was talking to my advisor my senior year, and I was telling her where I worked and what I was doing, and she was like, "Oh, that's really surprising because SLPs and behavior analysts, they really don't see eye to eye, and there's not a lot that they can agree on and stuff like that." I was like, "Yeah, but it would be so much better if you were an SLP and you had all these behavioral principles and you could use them, because why wouldn't everyone do that?"
Yeah.
It would make so much more sense if everyone just went by behavioral principles because they work so well.
It's really funny that you say that because my background is also in speech for my undergrad, and I feel like I've had so much success working with clients on some speech things and using reinforcement. Like, it's so simple.
I know, and
But so rare.
Don't do that.
Right.
I think the problem I'm running into right now, I have a student I'm working with, and she's scripting a lot, and the OT actually came in and decided to make her a book with her entire script in it. And he basically like retaught it to her with no reinforcement and no notice of when she would be done with this book. So there was no like tokens or any kind of thing to let her know like when the session was over. She retaught her an entire script that we had been putting on extinction for quite some time, and just came in and kind of unraveled a lot of things within a half an hour session. And it is tricky because I told her all of this, and I was like, here's our data. We've not been talking to this. You can see it going down, and like all different stuff. And she got very frustrated, I could tell, and finished her session, but kind of left a little abruptly. Not super, it wasn't anything super dramatic, but it is really frustrating that we all kind of, like almost everyone could benefit a little bit maybe from having multiple backgrounds besides just ABA. Or, you know, I don't know. Okay, I'm getting off
Yeah, I
on a
agree.
little bit of a tangent here. But it does make it challenging because I think that that was just another case where there was a little bit of a lack. She didn't want to stop teaching this story and didn't believe me that the scripts had been going down with ignoring them. So it's just interesting that, yeah, you kind of have these, you're working with the same kiddo, and but then there's this like difference of opinion. Where do you, what can you ethically say and do about it? It's tricky.
I
It's
see
hard.
that a lot.
Sorry. Keep going.
I see that a lot. I work with speech and OT, psychologists, social workers, whole team of people, and everybody has their own um, ingredients, so to speak, to add to the big recipe. And I feel like everybody pulls in their own direction. You know, the OTs want to give deep pressure, and you know, the speechies, they want to tell everybody how the student needs to express themselves. Um, and then, you know, I am trying to like push data on them. Uh, so it's really hard working with so many different people. And maybe, you know, I might appear to be bossy and a know-it-all, but I think they kind of appear the same way to me sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. I think everyone in their own little, I mean, if you're working with those kinds of different people, each one of you is going to have your I'm like, my way is better than yours kind of thing, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone, I mean, that's the reason you went into that field, is because you think that it's the best thing ever. So it's just tough
Right,
to
it
kind
is.
of work
It's
them
tricky to
together.
know where. Yeah, exactly. Because
We're all
yeah,
going for the same common goal, but it's just hard to get,
right.
you know.
And yeah, we're so data driven too. We want to see it, and I've had a hard time with that too. With people just being like, "Oh, well, she's doing great, and this is awesome, and this and that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you think that? That's awesome, but let's also see it." So that's another thing. Like, yeah, ethically, we can't really just be like, "Here's your graph, start taking data." So yeah, it's tricky. Oh, are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, my thing froze for like a minute. I was like, no. All
So
right.
here's another thing is when you do have a BCBA come into a new company or a new corporation, and how do you build that kind of relationship so that they know that you're not this know-it-all that's going to come in and, you know, change all the things that they've been working so hard for and stuff like that.
I wonder, just like one of the biggest things is making sure that you collaborate. And like, I mean, I know that seems kind of obvious, but I think just making sure that everybody feels like they still have a voice and that you are listening to what they have to say. And then definitely, like, this is where I think having good data really helps, because if someone is questioning something that you're doing or they disagree with it, hopefully that's where we could come in and show them, like, you know, you can see this behavior going down, or you can see this good behavior going up, or, you know, and hopefully you can kind of, not that you want to like sway them to change, you know, what their thinking is on something, but at least you can back up the reason that you're doing things and hopefully kind of keep them on your side while also collaborating with them too.
Um, to go off of that a little bit, like I mentioned before, I work for a public school. Um, so there's just a really big variety of people that I work with. And just last year, we had some lovely BCBA ladies come in and give you know, a couple-hour presentation on what a behavior really is, functions of behavior, some ABC data, really the bare basics. Um, and the problem was, I feel like people were just whispering about, you know, how does this lady know, and who is she to come tell us about our kids' behaviors, because we know the kids. I feel like that was the biggest thing. We know the kids, they're our kids, and we know them better than your data. And I was just really disappointed, I guess, in the people around me that they really had so little trust and um, didn't really care about the hours of work that she had put into it, and the school had paid for her to come out and give this whole presentation. Uh, and I feel like in the end, it's the kids that really wouldn't benefit.
Yeah, I totally agree.
My question is, how does somebody who's maybe a BCBA that's presenting really come off as a, trustworthy, not bossy, know-it-all person?
I think that's so hard when you're teaching someone something new. I worked in an office for like 5 years before I decided to change careers. Who came in to tell us about a new program or a new something. Everybody was just always so combative about it. And it's really hard, I think, to introduce change that's really different to people. So I wonder, I guess if you're like doing a seminar or something, you just kind of have to give it to them and hope that, somebody takes something from it. But I think in the sense of if you were going somewhere to where you're going to work for a long time, the best thing to do might be to introduce things slowly, and we could kind of shape behavior at that point and highly reinforce them for, doing the things that you kind of want to teach them, or if they're implementing things correctly or taking data or whatever. Because I think it's just so hard. Like, people just get stuck in their ways, and even if people would come and be like, this new computer program is going to save you a half an hour every day, people still be like, well, I don't want to do it. Like, it's really hard, I think, to introduce new things and new change to people. So maybe just doing it slowly and reinforcing it a lot. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'd agree. I think it's kind of all about like their closed-mindedness. I don't know if that's necessarily the word, but some people just don't want to get out of what they're doing, and they think that, like, this is fine, this is working, why are we going to change it? And I think that it would, to get them out of that, you just kind of have to crack that shell little by little. I would agree with you. Maybe not doing it all at once is going to be the best idea.
I think setting people up to be successful, not only like our students or clients, but people we work with too. Maybe give them a small goal to work on, and when they see it working and they're successful, then maybe they'll feel good about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of our books even talked about that, like how if you're choosing a behavior change program or like some kind of implementing something new, sometimes there are cases where the best thing to do might just be like the easiest behavior to change so that they can be successful as far as the staff too even, and they can see like, oh, this is working, and just kind of different things like that.
It's the kind of which behavior do you choose to change first, the easiest, the hardest, or, it's if you change the easiest one, then at least that they can see like, okay, hey, this works, so maybe I'll give it a chance.
When they can be successful and not so scared of, not that everybody hates change, but I would say as far as a
lot of people have problems with change.
Generally, yeah, there's a general hatred for it.
Yeah.
So
what happens if you... Oops, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I was going to say, what happens if you go into a company and you have this great idea to change something and no one else likes it? It's kind of along the same lines as, like, how do you get people to go along with what you're doing? As, like, how do you, if you absolutely can't get anyone to agree on this, or if 3 people agree and 2 of them don't, how do you modify it so that it's doable for everyone? Or do you modify it? Or I don't know.
That's tricky. If it was like a company-wide thing, that might be where it's good that you maybe have a contract or, something that you require of them as well as what they're requiring of you. But, I guess if you had like 50-50, that's tricky. That's like a tricky scenario.
I mean, do you take a poll and say, which one would you rather have? How would you like to see it change? I mean, I guess that's always an option, is to get feedback from everyone else.
Mhm.
It would
But
be interesting to hear why they don't like it, and maybe kind of have a bigger discussion about it instead of forcing something onto somebody and then ending up in like an uphill battle. Maybe try the friendly approach.
And maybe they can even, you could have a meeting like with the people that are, like if you did have a few people that were on your side, not that everybody needs to have sides or anything, but you could just even maybe have them point out some of the benefits or some of the things that they've noticed that they like, since they're in the same working position as the other people. Maybe they can offer some insight to each other a little bit.
I think that was also a point in the book. Not only are you keeping the management happy, but you have to keep the employers happy. You really have to benefit both parties and make it work for everybody.
right. Something else that I kind of found, well, not found that was interesting, but just thought about from the book was signing non-competes as a BCBA. I just don't really understand, I guess, how that works. If you're a BCBA in one company and you're working to make their company better, and then to go work for a different company to make, I mean, I don't understand why you can't make both companies better and still have it be ethical, as long as they're not completely fighting against each other. I mean, you're not making one company better so that they can outbeat the other company just to, I mean, benefiting two people seems better than benefiting just one person. I don't know, I might be seeing that the wrong way.
I think there are many different ways you can spin a non-compete contract. And it really depends, I think, what's written on the inside. My first job was in an ABA clinic, and 2 years into it, I was asked to sign a non-compete. And it was either that or leaving the company, which is what I ended up doing. Um, and some of the things that were in the contract were I was unable to provide any kind of services for any of the families I'd ever worked with at the clinic for, I think, like 3 years after I was done working for the company. And I thought that was just a little unreasonable, especially since I was young and I was getting a lot of money on the side babysitting for the clients and not really directly competing with the clinic. So I ended up just making the choice and not signing it and leaving the company. Um, so I'm not really sure. Maybe, had they thought I would be going into these homes and then providing my own therapy on the side, which would compete with my boss's living.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
don't know if
that's
that makes
a
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, when I started at the center that I work at now, I had to sign a non-compete. So I think, which was that I couldn't go work at another center like that and take the information that I learned from the center that I work at now to that center to help other people. But in the sense of doing it within corporations to benefit the internal workings of one corporation and benefit the internal workings of another corporation, would that be possible? Or would that violate a non-compete? Or would it just depend on, the contract, I guess?
I think it would depend on what's written on the inside,
Yeah.
especially if I was your boss and I had paid for all your training. I don't know if I would be necessarily too happy with you taking that training and benefiting somebody else, where
Right.
maybe you could spend more time working for my clients.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about non-competes.
I don't either. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm not chiming in much, but yeah, I don't know much about them either.
That's okay. That's why I asked, because I didn't either, and I had read it, and I was like, I wonder, I wonder how that works, and if
I know, yeah, I know a lot of corporations have them. When I worked in an office, it was like a corporate office, and they they had you sign them too because if you were there and trained there, I think that was like for 3 months or something. They didn't want you working with another similar company.
right.
So apparently they thought it all just soaked out of your brain in 3 months. But yeah, I guess I understand why, but it is kind of, in a BCBA sense, you would think, like, why not help more people? It's kind of like those drug companies that fight against each other to find, better medicine. Well, why don't they work together to find the best medicine? So it's
Right.
like, we are a treatment option, so why can't we? But yeah, I guess, some companies just don't want you to do that.
Maybe it's not always about not helping the other people or more people. Maybe it's about stealing clients. And it's a way to hold somebody accountable for,
Yeah,
let's say, taking a client to a different provider.
mhm. That's true. I didn't think about it that way.
For those unethical people out there.
Yeah, which I'm sure there are some, but
Yeah, I think the big thing about the non-competes is you just really have to abide by it. If you're going to sign a contract, you should stick to it.
And you can always negotiate those things too. I mean, if you're signing a contract that you're not comfortable with, they can change parts for you, or, I mean, other people have probably done it in the past. So that's always something to think about too. But then again, that's tricky as well. And yeah. I only have one more thing on my list. I don't know about you guys. Was kind of like the working with family.
oh yeah.
That's the last thing I have. I crossed everything else out.
I also have dating in the workplace.
Oh, good one.
Ooh,
We should save it for last.
Way to be
yeah.
saucy, Diana. Okay, dating in the okay, like it.
Working with family, I think that kind of goes for working with family and maybe like really close friends. Um,
Yeah.
and I actually work in one of my best friend's classrooms, which makes for a really interesting dynamic. We were actually coworkers first, and then we became friends over time, and we somehow ended up working together. And it's fun, but sometimes I feel like we might not always agree on things, and maybe our friendly relationship kind of gets in the way. Not too much, but enough for at least me to notice.
I would agree. I mean, I work with my sister-in-law right now, and so I mean, I she knows a lot more about ABA than I do because she's been working in the field for a lot longer than I have. But sometimes it's hard to keep those relationship dynamics out of the workplace and keep things professional, especially when I have she knows everyone in my family, so my other sister-in-law texts me at work, and she needs to know if I like this dress, which, like, if I were to look at it on my lunch break or whatever, for my sister's wedding, and I walk downstairs and say, hey, do you like this dress? It's just hard to keep those things out of the workplace when you're so comfortable with each other. But as far as working with clients goes, it's been easier to keep the I don't know. I'm still really comfortable with her, so it's easy to talk to her about things about my clients and ask for help, which I think is really nice. Whereas if you were talking to someone you didn't really know, it's a lot harder to admit that you need help with something, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, it really depends on the dynamic of the relationship, I think, because I think it can, I mean, as long as you're following your ethical guidelines and you're not like telling each other things that each other should know, or, not crossing any of those lines, I think it could, have its benefits and its challenges, because, some of the challenges could be, and I'm sure it's not like in these cases, but with other people, it could be those kind of the scenario we talked about earlier. If you're telling people a lot of things and maybe you're making up things before you really know the functions of behaviors or stuff like that. So I do think it could definitely cause some problems, and it could cause some issues if you don't see eye to eye on something, and you kind of have that work relationship and friend relationship thing hanging in the balance. So I think there are a few things, but I think if you kind of make sure you don't cross those ethical guidelines, I think you're, like you said, it can be a good thing too. You can kind of be more comfortable with that person.
That can also, go ahead.
I think it can definitely be beneficial, like you said. But maybe, let's say, it's Monday and you and your girlfriend just came into work and you're working with your client, but then you're talking about the weekend. How fair is it to your client that you're, taking time out of their, therapy time to talk about like your personal stuff? And
Right.
I think that would definitely be a problem.
I would agree. I think that you just have to try and keep that, stuff out of that time frame. Like I said, I wouldn't have asked her about my sister's dress if I were with a client, or if, wouldn't have like interrupted anything like that for those kinds of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you can also think about it in that if you have this close relationship, it's easy to kind of cause drama or talk behind your other coworkers' backs. It's easy to kind of say, like, did you see what she did today? Or, which is easy to do all the time, regardless of your relationship, but I think it's easier to do when you see that person all the time. You're like, man, I can't believe what she's doing, and I think that that's really an unethical thing that could occur as well.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it's just in most of our natures to maybe give our opinion when it shouldn't be given.
Right.
Yeah. All right, should we go on to dating in the workplace?
Let's do it.
Have you ever heard the saying, don't poop where you eat? Gotta be careful.
No, I haven't, but that's great.
Yeah.
It's usually done with it's usually used with a different word, but you get the idea.
So I feel like when I read the article, there was so much more to the article, but that really caught my attention was just dating and trying to figure out between professional and personal things in the workplace, and not really blurring those lines, and maybe like what the effects of that would be, because I feel like, granted, I work in a school where it's like 90 women to one man, but that one guy is usually dating somebody that we work with, and I wonder, is it right? Is it wrong? Should it be happening?
I think that if you keep it professional, it's not a terrible thing, but you have to keep that professional kind of relationship, because I know when I first started working at the center, there was one guy that worked there. It wasn't actually when I first started, but it was after I came back, like during the summer. There was a new guy working there, and we hit it off, but we weren't ever like dating. We were just friends, and we just talked and whatever. But there was one time he's like the really flirty guy and like the really cool, kind of guy. And he actually, when I walked past, he smacked my butt with a clipboard, and I kind of like turned around and looked at him. I was like, what are you doing? And I told my sister-in-law that, and she was like, oh my God, he can't be doing that. I was like, no, I know. And so it's just like, I don't know, you have to keep those lines very, very strict because stuff like that isn't okay.
It's
Yeah,
so
aside,
tricky because, oh, sorry. It's tricky because your work is one of your networks, and it is where a lot of people do end up meeting other people, or they meet people through people. I mean, I have a ton of friends who have dated people that they work with, or married people that they worked with, even. So it is such a tricky situation, but you're right. The lines just have to be extremely clear. Like, I feel like you have to try to keep it, I guess, outside of work as much as possible. But
Well, that and like in that
yeah,
scenario,
it's
there was
tricky though.
never ever a time where we had hung out outside of work. It was
Okay.
just one of those things where he was just like a really flirty person, and it just happened, and I was like, that's, I don't know, it wasn't okay, but I don't know, it was just bad. No one else saw it. It was just it. I don't know.
yeah, definitely being on the receiving end. I feel like, some people could even really blow it out of proportion, and there's always the sexual harassment
Right.
issues in the workplace. And, what if it wasn't somebody you work with? What if it was a parent? Or what if it was a student? Because, I think that happens. We see it on the news all the time, bizarre relationships with students and teachers and who knows what. Um, so yeah, I guess the best is just to stay out of it. Steer clear.
Yeah.
I would steer clear. Unless, maybe things go really professionally and you do end up marrying the guy you work with.
Yeah. He doesn't work there
Right.
anymore, so that's a good thing.
But yeah, it is hard because that is right. It's a network, and that is a way that people meet people. So I think maybe just one of the good guidelines would maybe be just keeping as much of it outside of work as possible. Even
Personal
though
space.
that's hard though, like that is tricky. Like it doesn't always work that way. Especially if they're spanking your butt with clipboard.
Right? Didn't ask for that to happen, I swear.
No, I know.
But all right.
God.
Well,
But yeah, I think we all agree. You just have to like try to avoid it, and but if you really are having a connection with someone, I guess keep it outside of work. I think as much as possible.
what if there's um what if you're in a situation where you see two coworkers like getting too close, at work? Do you say something and be like, "Hey, that's not the time or place to, I mean, I feel like yes, but it's also that awkward moment when you walk up to a coworker and say, "Hey, you probably shouldn't be doing that."
Yeah, that's tricky, and that's where maybe I guess if you're like the BCBA who's seeing that, I think you would. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to say something, like especially if it's getting in the way of their work or their like ability to do their job and treat clients. I think then as a BCBA, it's your job to say something, but that is it's gonna be tricky. Like that's just there's no easy way to go around that besides just being like,
Honest.
it's great you guys are happy with each other, but maybe you need to make sure that you kind of save the fun stuff for when you leave work.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I feel like that's all I had on my little list. Did anyone else
Yeah.
have it? Or
No,
do
I
you
think
want
that's
to keep talking about that, or are we feeling good?
I think I'm good. I'm feeling good.
Me too.
yeah, same. I'll try and get this posted tonight. I'm gonna eat dinner and then I'll get it posted. So.
That's my first priority as well.
All right. Have a good
And
night, guys.
remember, please don't ask me to violate my professional ethics. That'll be the quote.
Yes. I mean, I
The
probably should have,
end.
said that. All right.
Now you have it. Now you have it. And the rest
There
of the
you go.
class, you're welcome. I'm just kidding. All right.
Yay.
Well, have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Okay. Goodbye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.